There is an extraordinary change going on in the world, and it's something that I've been flagging since about 2012. This generational change, this fourth turning that's coming, was probably going to change the system that we operated in. And as things developed, these two hypotheses of mine became stronger and stronger. Obviously, we've all seen the rise of Bitcoin, and we've all seen the political shifts that are going on in the world today. It all looks like we're reaching this point, and I've said this is when macro, crypto, politics, everything comes into the same big bucket. It's all concentrated in our pure focus right now. You see, the news is starting to come out that central banks are going to adopt digital currencies. If you remember, this started getting floated by, I think Facebook Libra was one of the first. They came up with this idea of creating a global basket of currencies that were digital, and they would have this foundation in Switzerland, and that global basket would be a new world currency which could be used for the internet to interact on. The central banks looked at that and said, no, you're not doing this because this really is redefining the rules of currency. And what you're going to create, it was basically a stable coin, but what you're going to create is something that's out of our control. Now, they kind of don't mind Bitcoin yet, and we'll come on to that later. They've observed it, they've seen it, and they're learning from it. Next was the IMF, out this week, papers about digital currencies. Then we've seen it from the Department of Justice in the US. We've seen it from the agreement in the US for certain banks to custody Bitcoin and other digital assets, allowing them to come into the system. We've seen a whole bunch of these things. This could be a really, really good way to solve many of the world's problems. It solves the SWIFT problem, it solves the Eurodollar funding markets problems, it solves the problems of getting money to people who need it. Central banks could also change entirely the structure of how money and monetary policy works, and fiscal policy, because they can give it to different people in different ways. So they can credit the restaurateur, but then penalise with negative interest rates the baby boomer saver because they want to release their money back into the economy. They can give students a positive interest rates to help them save. They can change everything. This is the rise of behavioural economics and incentive systems. So governments essentially using big data can find who they need to stimulate at any time and adjust accordingly. They can do it dynamically. This is a structural, massive shift to everything we understand about economics, particularly macroeconomics. But the currency agreement is likely to be, let's say, a trade-weighted global basket. So that means, or maybe there's an a commodity producers basket as well. So people can have different baskets of currencies. That moves away from the need for the SWIFT payment system. It moves away from the US dollar issues. When you're looking for the life raft, okay, how do I avoid this? The debasement of currencies. Forget the freedom stuff because I just don't think that exists in our world. So Bitcoin is my answer to that. I own gold and I own a lot more Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin works on a number of levels, and I'm not going to go into it now because there's plenty of pieces from me on why I think Bitcoin is a reserve asset and probably the world's most pristine reserve asset. It's the only hard asset that has a fixed supply that eventually runs out, and demand is increasing. And as the world is turning towards Bitcoin and its price goes up, its market cap is only 200 billion. It's noise right now. It's like a mid-cap S&P stock. But I think it's going to overtake gold in size. Gold is about 10 or 11 trillion. I think Bitcoin goes much bigger than that over time too. But that's where it's headed, because for this modern digital world, it is the payment system that we all want. But it's also, more importantly, it's the store of value we need. Now, some people say, well, if the central banks have got this digital currency, why do we need Bitcoin? Two different things again. Remember, payment system, and Bitcoin does that extremely well. Bit slower than it could do, but the lightning layer and all of the development can mean that. But nothing is a reserve asset like Bitcoin. Literally nothing. not even gold. It is truly extraordinary, and it's so innovative, we have no idea where it's going. And when we talk about Bitcoin, we can also look at the other parts of the digital asset ecosystem. That is not going away. The genie is out of the bottle. Ethereum is not going away. Digital assets, tokenization, it's all coming. And it's all going to slot in to these new digital currencies brought by the central banks. So payment systems and rails and everything are going to change massively. Everything we understand, it's going to be as big a revolution of money that the internet was for everything from email to video to shopping to everything, to commerce. It just changed the world we live in. That's the size of what this is. And this central bank digital currency is part of that narrative. And it is positive, I think, if you own Bitcoin. It is positive, I think, if you own gold. I think gold has that place for those concerned about the future of Bitcoin. But I will take that risk in Bitcoin. I will say, I think it goes a lot higher before I have to worry about that. And I do think Bitcoin is the cockroach that can't be killed. I think it is something too powerful for even governments to overcome. So the central banks are going to compete at payments level. So that's probably the end of stablecoins. And I think the central banks will force those out of the system. But Bitcoin as a pristine reserve asset is something different. It's like collateral for a new system, and I think other governments will begin to adopt it. First, it won't be the big governments, but some nation will be sick and tired of currency crisis and will just adopt Bitcoin as its currency. They'll probably first start putting it into their central bank reserves because it's a harder currency, and a game theory plays out. Many people suggest to me, well, the governments are going to ban Bitcoin. The IMF, the BIS, they're all going to get together and get rid of this. Well, at 200 billion, they don't care. Tap me on the shoulder when it's at $10 trillion, we'll talk again. So there's plenty of upside to play for before it starts to become something we need to worry about. They probably will give it a go. They've tried to ban gold. Last thing I've checked, it's been working for about 6 millennia as a currency, so it didn't really work, did it? And in this world of a distributed ledger, which is owned by everybody and owned by nobody, there's almost no chance, unless you shut down the internet entirely, to get rid of Bitcoin. It's impossible. It's a cockroach in finance, something you can never kill. And you see, that is its power, and that's what makes it so incredible. That's what makes it such a great reserve asset, and this very hardness of it. So I think they may try, but in a globalized world of regulatory arbitrage, somebody else will adopt it. I think it is something too powerful for even governments to overcome. And I think it is our life raft and our way out.